green yard. It is a beautiful, sunny, and hot July afternoon here in Phoenix, Arizona. We're in the beginning of July and it's 114 degrees outside right now. And we're here for a planting video. So I actually have our beautiful new tree right next to me here. This is a starfruit tree or a Carambola tree. Our starfruit trees actually do very well here in the Phoenix desert, especially as they mature. As they get to be a couple years in the ground, they get a little bit more acclimated to our climate. They can handle both our summers and our winters in the proper microclimate without any protection. What I mean by that is, in proper microclimate, they need that afternoon shade. They're always going to need that afternoon shade, but they can handle our morning and beginning kind of midday sun. They can also handle our winters without any protection after a couple years. So definitely a good tree to grow here in the Phoenix area, especially once you get a little bit more of a microclimate established, which we have here because we have our two giant mulberry trees. We have our passion fruit vines growing up those trees as well that have added kind of this really dense shaded area for most of our tropical trees. Speaking of which, we're over in the food forest part of the green yard, but not our typical food forest part where we have our koi fish pond and our jackfruit, our soursop, all of those really tropical trees. We're over here kind of in the introduction part of the green yard. Earlier this year I put in a gate, or a fence, and a gate which is not quite done yet. As kind of an introduction into the world that is this food forest here. Behind me I have our papaya tree. It's actually starting to flower again. Hopefully it's going to put on fruit before the end of the summer, or at least that's my goal. We have our longin. So the longin's actually been struggling since I planted it last year, around March. Actually, I think it was April last year. I have a video on that as well. It's been struggling. I've been having a really hard time with it. It'll put on new growth and that new growth will die back. And I found the solution. I wasn't watering it enough. So even with this heavy mulch, our longin does require that watering once a week. And it's actually putting on new growth and holding that new growth as well. So I think I finally found the solution. Longins can do really, really well here in the Phoenix area as well. We have our Suriname cherry in the back, as well as our foxtail palm tree. Next to the camera we have our Carambola tree, our lychee, as well as our rose apple. Both our rose apple and our longin and our Suriname cherry right now are putting off a ton of new growth. Our rose apple especially is really liking this temperature. Definitely likes it on the hotter side of things. But we're here to plant our Carambola tree. So the reason I picked this spot is because it is shaded in the afternoon, although a little bit of sun is peeking through right now, which it can handle. And it gets kind of midday sun, right? So this area here gets sun from about 10 to 12:30, 1 o'clock or so. I'm actually trimming up my living shade cover here, this giant mulberry tree. I'm trimming this up a little bit to get all the plants a little bit more sun, because a lot of them are kind of stunted in their growth and they actually need more sun, especially if I want to have them start fruiting. Like our Carambola tree is old enough that it should have fruited already, and it hasn't yet, but it's also very shaded and gets very little sun throughout the day. So I'm trying to trim everything up to give it a little bit of extra sun. This area has also been under mulch for the last basically 3 years since we moved in, so it's going to be interesting to dig out this mulch and clear away this mulch and see how good the soil is underneath. So let's go ahead and let's start getting this guy in the ground. He hasn't necessarily been enjoying being in the pot, putting off a little bit of new growth, but also having a lot of growth die back. So it's time to get him in the ground, get him established, and not move them again. Our starfruit trees are kind of like our drama queens of the plant world. If they're moved or a condition changes, they like to defoliate, turn yellow, and drop all their leaves, which this one's starting to do here with its leaves as well. So I definitely want to get it in its spot so it can be happy and healthy. So let's go ahead, let's move some of this mulch and get this carambola tree planted. Here we go. Alright, so our carambola tree is in the ground here, our star fruit tree. It's actually looking pretty happy for the fact that I just removed it out of the pot and it doesn't like to get moved. So it's actually doing pretty well right now. Unfortunately, when we get into that 110 or above degree temperature, for some reason I have some difficulty with my camera, so I did have some technical difficulties. I filmed, or I thought I was filming, actually digging out and planting and putting in the ground this star fruit tree, but unfortunately it overheated and did not film that. So I'm just going to kind of explain what I did with that. So I went ahead and I moved the mulch, which you saw a little bit of. I actually found that the top 2 inches of soil or so were actually pretty good looking. Let me see if I can get some here real quick to show you. But the top 2 inches or so of that soil was really in pretty good shape. It was, here we go. It was very black, very organically rich, definitely that broken down mulch. Lots of little buggies in it too, but we want that because they're breaking down that mulch for us. So top 2 inches of soil looked a lot like this, which is exactly what we want. But for some reason when I dug down below the top 2 inches over here, we actually ran into our normal clay soil. So we had that kind of heavy clay soil. It looks like that organically rich material hasn't broken down enough to really get in any deeper than the top 2 inches of that soil. Unlike where we have our granadilla, which we just planted in a previous episode, our sweet granadilla, and that one did break down a lot more. And I didn't have to mix in any soil. So what I ended up having to do, because it was really clay, it was this really clay soil here, I actually ended up having to use my nursery soil and bring it in, that really, really good soil, bring it in, mix it in the whole 50-50. So 50 is that clay soil, 50% is that clay soil, the other 50% is that nursery soil, and it ends up making a soil that looks very similar to our our broken down mulch that we had before. And then I took our carambola out. Luckily, it was very rooted out. I had this 3-gallon pot here. It actually has no soil left in it. So it was so rooted out that it took all of the soil with it, which is exactly what we want to see. That's a good, healthy plant. It took a little bit with positioning because when I first put it in the hole, the tree was really leaning back, right? And I wanted it to be a little bit more straight. So I actually planted it with the trunk a little bit tipped forward, just because I want the tree to have more of a straight structure there. So I'm hoping that will help set it off on the right foot. After that, I went ahead and added our agricultural sulfur, just like I do with all of my tropical fruit trees. Our carambola trees like their pH, their soil pH between that 5.5 and 6.5. The reason why we add in our agricultural sulfur and the reason why we are so concerned with soil pH here in the Phoenix Valley is because our soil pH is between 8 and 8.5. It's really alkaline, and most of our especially tropical trees, but as any non-native tree really, usually likes a lower pH. So we need to lower the pH of the soil, and the reason we do that is because when we add in our fish emulsion, our compost, all of those nutrients that we want the plant to take up, the soil pH has to be correct, or that plant won't be able to take up those nutrients. It won't be able to eat or feed itself. And that's where we get that really yellowing of the tree, where it looks like it's dying back. It's because we need that soil pH to be correct so that the tree itself can eat, which is what we really want it to do, so it can then feed us as well. I'm really excited for this tree. They are heavy producers here. I'm talking hundreds of star fruit can come off a 6-7 foot tall tree. So I'm hoping in a few years I can have hundreds of or 100 of those star fruits off this tree. It is a sweet star fruit. I know when I went to Peru last year in the summer, they had star fruit, carambola, and I was all excited. Turns out that their star fruit is sour star fruit, and they actually make like a juice out of it, as opposed to this sweet star fruit where you can just pick the fruit right off the tree and go ahead and take a bite and eat it. So that's the star fruit I was looking for. I'm really, really excited to hopefully have a harvest video for you guys here maybe next year. The one other really cool thing about our star fruit trees is that they do flower in the fall and they fruit in the early spring. So usually our star fruit is ready in February, March, when we have only citrus here in the valley, right? That's basically the only thing that's available and ripe and ready during that time. And so carambola gives us another opportunity to have some fruit other than our grapefruits, our lemons, our oranges during that springtime. So that's another reason I really, really wanted this tree, is to kind of fill in that gap. So hopefully someday I can be a little bit more self-sufficient and be able to harvest my citrus as well as my star fruit, my carambolas, to fill in that gap until that June, July time. I'm really excited for this tree. It's gotten a lot of new growth. I'm hoping it does really, really well here in this spot. And if you guys have any questions about the carambola, if you have any questions or want to see a video on another one of our fruiting or flowering trees here in the green yard, please feel free to comment below. Be happy to put a video out or answer those questions as best as I can. If you do have a piece of advice for me, I am always open to advice. I am not an expert. I am just someone who really, really likes growing those fruiting, flowering trees, and maybe someday I'll be an expert. I've kept pretty much everything alive so far, so that's a good thing, but definitely not an expert, an agricultural expert or anything like that. So if you have a piece of advice, if you want to share something, please make sure you comment below, and I look forward to hearing from you guys soon. And as always, live green, plant lots, and of course have fun. We'll see you next time.